The courtroom felt colder than the winter outside. Not the kind of cold that shivers across your skin, the kind that settles inside your bones, like a truth you never asked to face. Pale sunlight slipped through the tall windows, landing across polished wooden benches and faces that looked everywhere except at me. My divorce hearing, the end of a marriage that had once been a promise, and then slowly became a wound. I sat at my table, hands clasped so tightly the blood couldn't decide whether to stay or flee. Across the room, Adrian leaned back in his chair with the same composed, calculated confidence he had worn throughout our marriage. His lawyer whispered something to him, and he nodded half, smirking like he already knew the outcome. To him, this hearing was a performance. To me, it was the reckoning of every silent night, every swallowed truth, every bruise hidden beneath long sleeves and longer excuses. My daughter Alara sat behind me, quiet still, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Only 17. Yet her eyes carried a weight that belonged to someone much older. She hadn't spoken much since the separation. She hadn't cried, hadn't broken down, she just watched. Always watched. The judge cleared his throat and called the court to order. Papers shuffled, lawyers stood, and my heart hammered like a fist against a locked door. Adrian went first. He spoke about instability, emotional unpredictability, poor judgment, words coated in polite venom, lies that sounded polished from practice. He painted himself as a victim of my supposed chaos. A man who had tried everything to mend a home I had apparently torched with my negligence. I didn't interrupt. I'd spent years being told my voice was too loud, too emotional, too much. Silence had become second nature, but something shifted when the judge finally turned to me. "Mrs. Hale, do you wish to respond?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came, not because I had nothing to say, but because something unexpected happened behind me. A chair scraped, footsteps approached, and then a soft, steady voice. "Your Honor," Alara said, "I have something to show the court." My breath caught. Adrian's smirk vanished. The judge looked surprised, but he nodded. "Go ahead, young lady." Alara reached into her backpack and pulled out a small flash drive. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with a controlled fury I recognized. A fury she had inherited from me. "This," she said, "will explain everything." Every head in the courtroom turned. Adrian's face drained of color. My daughter stepped forward, shoulders squared, chin raised. Not a child intervening in adult matters, but a witness ready to shatter a silence too heavy for one person to carry alone. As she handed the drive to the clerk, something inside me cracked, not from fear, but from the terrifying hope that the truth was finally about to speak, and nothing is louder than the truth that's been silenced for too long. The courtroom screens flickered to life, washing the wood-paneled walls in a cold blue glow. People leaned in, curious, whispering, shifting, the sound of anticipation filling the space like static. I tried to breathe steadily, but my pulse thrashed like a trapped bird. Alara returned to her seat, her expression carved from stone. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Adrian. She stared straight ahead, as if bracing herself for a storm she'd spent years preparing for. Adrian stood suddenly. "We object." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Sit down, Mr. Hale. We will view the video. If it is irrelevant, I will determine that myself." Adrian's jaw tightened, and for the first time in a very long time he looked afraid. The lights dimmed. The video began, a shaky frame at first, a hallway, the sound of footsteps, a door slightly ajar. Alara's voice whispered behind the camera, "Mom, don't say anything. Just let them see." The camera pushed open the door, and there he was. Adrian, my husband, the man currently lecturing the court about my instability, standing in our living room, rage dripping from every movement. He was mid-tirade, pacing, shouting, the kind of shouting that makes the air itself shrink. His words weren't clear yet, but the venom was unmistakable. The courtroom fell silent. My chest tightened. Shame, fear, memory, it all hit at once. I hadn't known she had filmed this. God, she had lived this too. She had witnessed more than I ever realized. The video shifted angles. Adrian grabbed a vase and hurled it against the wall, the shatter exploding through the speakers. Several people in the courtroom flinched. Next came the part that made my breath stop. He turned toward the camera, not realizing it was there, his eyes wild, his voice a dagger. "Your mother is pathetic. She can't do anything right. You hear me? Not Inji. Into the silence of the courtroom, his words echoed like thunder. On the video, I appeared in the corner, small, trembling, apologizing for something that wasn't my fault. My voice was soft, pleading, trying to calm him. Adrian lunged toward me. A few gasps erupted in the courtroom. I remembered that moment like a scar remembers the blade. I felt the echo of his grip on my arm even now. But Elara had stepped between us. 16 at the time, brave in ways I didn't deserve. The camera shook violently as she shouted, "Stop!" The video froze. Elara's voice suspended in the air like a cracked bell. The judge inhaled sharply. The lawyers exchanged stunned looks. No one moved. Behind me, I heard a woman whisper, "My God." Adrian looked like he'd been skinned alive. Pale, exposed, stripped of the mask he'd worn for years. The screen faded to black. Elara stood again, her voice steady, her eyes blazing with unbearable truth. "This," she said softly, "is the man who calls my mother unstable." My heart broke and healed, all in the same breath. Sometimes the truth doesn't whisper. Sometimes it detonates. The courtroom screens flickered to life, washing the wood, paneled walls in a cold blue glow. People leaned in, curious, whispering, shifting. The sound of anticipation filling the space like static. I tried to breathe steadily, but my pulse thrashed like a trapped bird. Elara returned to her seat, her expression carved from stone. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Adrian. She stared straight ahead, as if bracing herself for a storm she'd spent years preparing for. Adrian stood suddenly. "We object." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Sit down. Mr. Hale, we will view the video. If it is irrelevant, I will determine that myself." Adrian's jaw tightened, and for the first time in a very long time, he looked afraid. The lights dimmed. The video began, a shaky frame at first. A hallway. The sound of footsteps. A door slightly ajar. Elara's voice whispered behind the camera, "Mom, don't say anything. Just let them see." The camera pushed open the door, and there he was, Adrian, my husband. The man currently lecturing the court about my instability. Standing in our living room, rage dripping from every movement. He was mid-tirade, pacing, shouting, the kind of shouting that makes the air itself shrink. His words weren't clear yet, but the venom was unmistakable. The courtroom fell silent. My chest tightened. Shame, fear, memory, it all hit at once. I hadn't known she had filmed this. God, she had lived this too. She had witnessed more than I ever realized. The video shifted angles. Adrian grabbed a vase and hurled it against the wall, the shatter exploding through the speakers. Several people in the courtroom flinched. Next came the part that made my breath stop. He turned toward the camera, not realizing it was there. His eyes wild. His voice a dagger. "Your mother is pathetic! She can't do anything right! You hear me? Not Angie." Into the silence of the courtroom, his words echoed like thunder. On the video, I appeared in the corner, small, trembling, apologizing for something that wasn't my fault. My voice was soft, pleading, trying to calm him. Adrian lunged toward me. A few gasps erupted in the courtroom. I remembered that moment like a scar remembers the blade. I felt the echo of his grip on my arm even now. But Elara had stepped between us. 16 at the time, brave in ways I didn't deserve. The camera shook violently as she shouted, "Stop." The video froze. Elara's voice suspended in the air like a cracked bell. The judge inhaled sharply. The lawyers exchanged stunned looks. No one moved. Behind me, I heard a woman whisper, "My God." Adrian looked like he'd been skinned alive, pale, exposed, stripped of the mask he'd worn for years. The screen faded to black. Elara stood again, her voice steady, her eyes blazing with unbearable truth. "This," she said softly, "is the man who calls my mother unstable." My heart broke and healed, all in the same breath. Sometimes the truth doesn't whisper. Sometimes it detonates. The judge leaned back in his chair, absorbing everything, the video, the silence, the weight of the truth that had just reshaped the room. His expression wasn't anger, nor sympathy. It was something heavier, realization. He removed his glasses, polishing them with a slow, measured motion that felt almost ceremonial. "We will resume in a moment," he said. "The court needs time to process this new evidence." The gavel struck, but the tension didn't ease. As people stood, murmurs rushed through the courtroom like wind through dry leaves. "Did you know?" I had no idea. "Poor woman. That child is brave." He tried to hide all that. Some stared at me with pity, others with admiration. A few with shame, as if they were realizing the quiet disasters unfolding in the homes of people they knew. But none of that mattered. My focus was on Alara. She was sitting perfectly still, hands folded, the faintest tremble in her breathing. I slid into the seat beside her. For a moment, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. Years of unspoken things lived in that silence. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I turned to her, stunned. "Why on earth would you apologize?" Her eyes glistened. "Because I filmed it. Because I kept it. Because I saw you hurting so many times, and I didn't know if showing this would make things better or worse." Her voice cracked. "I didn't want to expose you. I just didn't know another way to save you." Something inside me broke. Not painfully, but like a chain snapping after years of strain. I took her hands in mine. "Alara," I whispered. "You didn't expose me. You freed me." She inhaled sharply, lowering her gaze. A tear slid down her cheek. I brushed it away with my thumb. "You were just a child," I said softly. "You shouldn't have had to protect me. I should have protected you." She shook her head. "You did in every way you could." Footsteps echoed behind us. Hesitant, uneven. Adrian. His presence was a storm before it arrives, heavy and charged. He stopped a few feet away. "Alara, we need to talk." Alara didn't lift her head. I didn't turn either. He tried again, voice gentler than I had heard in years. "Sweetheart." She stood. Not suddenly, not angrily, but with the calm, decisive grace of someone who had finally outgrown fear. "I'm not your sweetheart," she said, voice steady. "I'm the girl who saw you break my mother." The entire hallway froze. Adrian flinched, the words landing sharper than any physical blow. "You taught me what love is not," she said. "And that's why I'll never let anyone treat me the way you treated her." She walked past him without waiting for a response. I followed her, leaving Adrian standing alone, swallowed by a silence he couldn't manipulate. For the first time in my life, the distance between us didn't feel like a loss. It felt like freedom. We stepped into the courthouse corridor, the hum of conversations echoing against the marble walls. People glanced our way, their eyes filled with stunned sympathy or quiet respect. Some parted instinctively, as though giving space to a truth that had been too long denied. Alara walked slightly ahead of me, her shoulders tight, her breath uneven. I knew that walk. The one where you try to stay composed while carrying something too heavy for your heart. I quickened my steps. "Alara," I called softly. She didn't stop, but she slowed just enough for me to reach her. I gently touched her arm. "You did something incredibly brave back there." Her throat bobbed. It didn't feel brave. It felt terrifying. "That's what bravery usually feels like," I said with a faint, sad smile. She finally looked up. Her eyes weren't angry. They were exhausted, worn, older than they should have ever been. I wanted to take every heavy moment from her. Every memory she shouldn't have had to witness. But healing doesn't erase the past, it rebuilds the person standing in front of it. Before I could say another word, my attorney hurried toward us. "Mrs. Hale," he said quietly, "we may have grounds to request full custody immediately. The judge is deeply concerned about what he saw." Alara stiffened. I inhaled slowly. "Do we need to go back inside right now?" "No," he replied. "The judge is taking a private recess. He'll call us back soon. But you should know." His voice softened. "That video changed everything. Everything. A word that used to terrify me. Because everything once meant losing myself, losing control, losing hope. But now, for the first time, everything felt like a door opening instead of closing." "Thank you," I murmured. He gave a sympathetic nod and stepped away. Alara let out a shaky breath. "Mom, what happens now?" I faced her fully. "Now, we stop surviving. And we start living?" It was then that a rustling sound caught our attention. A woman, maybe in her early 30s, wearing a navy blazer, approached us with hesitant steps. She looked nervous but determined. "Excuse me," she said gently. I just wanted to say something." We both looked at her. "I sat behind you in the courtroom," she said. "I saw the video. And I saw the way your daughter stepped in." Her voice quivered. "I endured something similar, and I never had the courage to speak up." She wiped a tear before it could fall. "Watching your daughter stand for you, it reminded me that silence doesn't protect us. It traps us." Alara blinked, surprised. The woman continued, "You should know, what she did today will change more lives than just yours." My heart clenched, because trauma isolates you, makes you believe you're alone in a darkness only you can see. Until suddenly someone says, "Me too," and the room fills with light. Alara whispered, "Thank you." The woman nodded, her eyes lingering with quiet admiration before she walked away. As the echo of her heels faded, Alara slipped her hand into mine. "Mom," she asked softly. "Yes." For the first time, I'm not scared of him anymore. And for the first time, neither was I. The judge's assistant appeared at the end of the corridor, calling everyone back into the courtroom. The echo of her voice rolled through the hall like a distant drum. Steady, inevitable, summoning us back to the battleground. Alara squeezed my hand once before letting go. "We're ready," she whispered, and for the first time, I believed her. For the first time, I believed myself. When we walked back in, the energy had shifted. The room no longer felt like a place I was being judged. It felt like a place waiting for judgment to be delivered onto the one who had always escaped it. Adrian was already seated, shoulders hunched, fingers tapping anxiously against the table. His lawyer leaned close to him, whispering fiercely, but Adrian's eyes were unfocused, staring somewhere far away, maybe at the crumbling ruins of the version of himself he had always convinced the world to see. The judge entered and everyone rose. "Please be seated," he said, his voice noticeably firmer than before. My heart pounded so loudly I could feel it in my fingertips. He shuffled through some papers, then looked up at us with a somber expression, the kind that carried the weight of a man who had seen far too many families torn apart by things nobody spoke of until it was almost too late. "Mr. and Mrs. Hale," he began, "what we witnessed before recess was deeply troubling. More than troubling. It revealed a pattern of emotional and psychological harm that cannot be ignored." Adrian's jaw clenched. I felt Alara's breath hitch beside me. The judge continued, "Mrs. Hale, do you feel safe in Mr. Hale's presence?" A year ago, I would have looked at Adrian before answering, measuring the danger in his eyes, calculating what truth might cost me later. But today, I met the judge's gaze head-on. "No, Your Honor, I do not." "And your daughter?" he asked gently. Alara didn't wait for permission to speak. "Neither do I." The certainty in her voice sliced through the room like a beam of light. Adrian shot up. "This is outrageous." "Sit down," the judge snapped. No gavel needed this time. Adrian froze and slowly sank back into his seat. The judge turned to me again. "Mrs. Hale, based on the evidence provided and the testimony given, I am granting you temporary full custody effective immediately. Mr. Hale will have no unsupervised visitation until further evaluation." The words struck me like wind after drowning. Sharp, shocking, life-giving. Alara reached for my hand under the table. I didn't pull away this time. I held on. Adrian muttered something under his breath. Something angry, desperate. But the judge ignored him entirely. "A's for the divorce settlement," the judge said. "Given the circumstances, we will be revisiting the distribution of assets and support." Adrian's composure crumbled. Papers slid from his hands. His lawyer tried to steady him, but the damage was done. For the first time, Adrian looked small. Not because he was defeated, but because the truth had finally stripped him of the illusion of power. The judge's final words landed with the gravity of a closing door. This court will no longer permit silence to shield harm. The gavel struck once. A sound that felt like the end of a nightmare, and the beginning of a life we had almost forgotten how to imagine. The moment the gavel struck, the courtroom dissolved into movement. Chairs scraping, murmured conversations rising, attorneys gathering files like debris after a storm. But for me and Alara, everything slowed. It felt like the world was catching its breath. As people filed out, I stayed seated, my hands trembling slightly against the polished wooden table. Not from fear anymore, but from the shock of hearing out loud what I had spent years convincing myself wasn't true. "You did it," a soft voice whispered beside me. Alara. Her eyes glistened with something deeper than relief, something like recognition. Recognition of the woman she needed me to be, and the woman I was finally becoming. Before I could respond, Adrian rose abruptly, his chair screeching backward. A few heads turned. His lawyer tugged his sleeve, whispering harshly, but Adrian shrugged her off as if every sound in the room was an insult meant for him alone. He stared at me, not with the familiar coldness, not with the calculated charm he wore like armor, but with a hollow disbelief. like he was suddenly the one standing in the ruins. For a moment our eyes locked, and just like that, I saw the truth. He wasn't stunned because he lost. He was stunned because he finally realized he couldn't rewrite this version of reality. Not this time, not in front of the world. His mouth twisted, a storm gathered behind his eyes. But for once, that storm wasn't my problem to survive. His lawyer touched his arm again. "Adrian, please. Not here." He clenched his jaw, snatched his papers, and stormed out through the side exit, the exit they usually reserved for people who couldn't face the crowd. The door slammed shut, the echo faded, and it felt like something inside me unclenched for the first time in years. The judge's assistant approached us with a stack of documents. "Please step into the consultation room," she said, her tone professional but warm. "There are a few immediate forms to complete for custody transition." Transition. A word that sounded like crossing a border into a place I had been trying to reach my whole life. We followed her into a small room with pale yellow walls and a lamp humming quietly in the corner. The air smelled of old books and something faintly citrus. Like a place meant for decisions, not battles. Alara sat beside me as I filled out lines and signatures that felt heavier than ink. At one point, she leaned her head gently onto my shoulder. I paused. I hadn't realized how much I missed that simple, innocent weight. Her trust resting against me without fear, without tension, without waiting for something to break. "Mom," she whispered, "can we go home now?" Her voice cracked on the word home, a word we hadn't used freely in a long time. "Yes," I said, brushing my thumb gently across her temple. "We can go home." She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to fall asleep in the back seat while I drove her back from violin lessons, humming softly to herself. But when she opened her eyes again, she wasn't that little girl anymore. She was the young woman who stood in a courtroom and spoke the truth that saved us both. When we walked out of the consultation room, the hallway was nearly empty. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows in warm, amber slants, lighting the path ahead of us like a quiet invitation. I took Alara's hand, not out of fear, not out of habit, but out of gratitude. A slow, steady breath escaped her. "Mom?" "Yes?" Today felt like. She paused, searching for the right words, like finally waking up. I squeezed her hand gently. "May too." And as we stepped out into the open air, a soft breeze lifted her hair, as if the world itself was exhaling for us. Because sometimes freedom doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it simply waits, until you're brave enough to walk toward it. The sunlight outside the courthouse felt unfamiliar, almost unreal. Like stepping out of a dark theater into the bright afternoon, blinking as your eyes relearn the shape of the world. Alara and I stood on the steps for a moment, neither of us speaking. Both of us feeling the weight of the day settle and shift, transforming into something lighter, something we didn't quite dare to name yet. People walked past us, lawyers, couples, families, each carrying their own stories. Yet for the first time in years, I didn't feel like one of the broken ones. I felt like someone finally running out of the burning house, coughing, bruised but alive. Alara exhaled shakily. "I thought he'd scream," she admitted. I glanced at her. "He wanted to." "I know," she said. "That's what scared me, that he didn't." It was a strange, heartbreaking truth. Sometimes the quietest anger is the most dangerous. But today, even that danger couldn't reach us. We walked toward the parking lot together, the gravel crunching under our shoes. The afternoon breeze carried the faint scent of pine from the trees lining the courthouse grounds. For a moment, I let myself breathe it in, the scent of something clean, untainted. When we reached the car, Alara hesitated instead of getting in. She leaned against the door, staring at the sky as if waiting for it to give her permission. "Mom," she murmured. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think he hates me now?" The question sliced through me. I stepped toward her, gently brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "No," I whispered. "He doesn't hate you. But he might hate the truth, and that isn't your fault." Alara blinked rapidly, fighting tears she didn't want to shed. "It just all feels heavy, because you carried it for so long by yourself," I said softly. "Today, you set it down." A single tear escaped before she brushed it away. "I'm tired of being afraid of him." "You won't have to be anymore." I meant it, with every bone in my body. With every breath of freedom we had earned today, we got into the car, and for a few minutes, we just sat there, hands intertwined over the center console, neither of us speaking. The quiet hummed around us, warm and strange and new. Then, slowly, I turned the key, the engine came alive, and something inside me did too. The drive home was different. It wasn't the tense, suffocating silence that used to fill the car whenever we left court or family therapy, or one of Adrian's manufactured reconciliation attempts. This silence was lighter, curious, hopeful. Trees blurred past the windows, shadows shifting over us like old memories trying to keep up, but failing, because we were moving forward. For the first time, truly forward. Halfway home, Alara whispered, "Can we get ice cream?" I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in months. "Of course, any flavor you want." She smiled, and it wasn't a small, cautious smile. It was real, alive. We pulled into a small roadside ice cream shop, the kind with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. Inside, the cool air smelled like vanilla and childhood. We sat by the window, 2 cones melting too fast under the warm sun. Ellara took a bite and winced. "Brain freeze," she mumbled. I laughed again. "Worth it?" she said. And in that moment, watching her lick ice cream off her wrist, sunlight catching in her hair, her shoulders finally relaxed, her laughter soft but free, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a very long time. We were going to be okay. Not immediately, not magically, but eventually. Because from today on, we weren't running from fear. We were walking toward life. And sometimes, the smallest steps toward freedom feel like miracles. That night, after the ice cream, after the long drive filled with quiet music and quieter thoughts, we finally reached home. But stepping through that front door felt different now. The air wasn't heavy anymore. The walls didn't echo with memories of arguments or whispered fears. It felt, barely gently, like a sanctuary again. Ellara walked in first, pausing in the hallway as if waiting to see whether the house remembered its old shadows. But the house stayed still, peaceful, silent in a way that didn't suffocate, only rested. She turned to me, expression soft. "Do you ever think a house can breathe?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe it breathes with the people inside it." She nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something she had suspected for a long time. We moved through the house quietly, switching on lights one by one. The soft glow pooled across the floors, illuminating the small details that had once seemed impossible to appreciate. The framed photos, the worn sofa cushion, the stack of books by the coffee table. It felt like reclaiming something stolen. Not just space, but safety. Alara went to her room to change into comfortable clothes, and I stood alone in the living room. My reflection shimmered faintly in the window, layered with the outside world. For a long time, I didn't recognize the woman who stared back at me. The one with the tired eyes, the clenched jaw, the shoulders always braced for impact. But tonight she looked different. Not lighter, not healed, but standing straighter, breathing deeper, alive in a way she hadn't been in years. I didn't realize I had tears in my eyes until one rolled down my cheek. Not sadness, not grief, something else. The quiet relief of surviving. The soft, trembling release of knowing I didn't have to pretend anymore. "Mom," I turned. Ellara stood in the doorway, wearing an oversized T-shirt and holding something in her hands, a small, battered notebook. A notebook I hadn't seen in years. "I found this in the drawer," she said, stepping closer. "It's yours, right?" My breath caught. Yes, it was mine. A journal I'd started long ago, back when hope still felt like something I could write down without fear of it being ripped apart. I took it from her gently. The pages were worn at the corners, the ink slightly faded. On the first page was something I had forgotten I'd even written. "One day, we will be free. One day, the truth will save us." Alara read it over my shoulder. Her breath hitched. That's today," she whispered. I pressed the notebook against my chest, feeling its weight, its history, its promise. "Yes," I whispered back. "It is." She stepped closer, curling into my arms the way she hadn't done since she was small. I held her tightly, feeling the shape of her ribs, the warmth of her cheek against my shoulder, the fragile strength of her heartbeat. "Mom," she murmured, "can we make things new now?" I breathed in the scent of her hair, the soft smell of home that I'd forgotten. "We already are," I said. "Every minute from now on is something new." She nodded into my shoulder, and I felt her relax, really relax, for the first time in years. No flinching toward the door. No listening for footsteps. Just rest. Just safety. Just us. Later, after she went to bed, I sat by the window with the journal open on my lap. The night outside was quiet, the streetlights casting long golden bands across the pavement. For the first time, the future didn't look like a cliff. It looked like a road. Long, winding, unknown, but open. Beautifully, terrifyingly open. And as I held a pen above the blank page, I realized something powerful. Survival was the last chapter of the old life. Healing would be the first chapter of the new one. And tonight I was finally ready to write it. The next morning, sunlight entered my room in a way it hadn't in a long time. Gently, without being filtered through the fog of fear. I opened my eyes slowly, letting the warmth touch my skin. For a moment I didn't move. I just lay there listening. No footsteps pacing the hallway. No slammed cabinets. No tension humming in the air like a warning. Just quiet. A peaceful, steady quiet. I sat up, stretching my fingers along the edge of the blanket. The house felt different again, lighter awake, as if it sensed the shift in us. In me. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw Elara already awake, curled on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders and a mug of tea between her hands. Her hair was messy, her face soft, and she was staring out the window as if seeing the world for the first time. "Morning," I murmured. She turned, and the small smile she gave me was the kind that could rebuild entire lives. "Morning." I sat beside her, and she leaned her head against my shoulder, unhurried, unafraid. For a few minutes, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibilities. Eventually, Elara broke the quiet. "What happens now?" she asked. Her voice wasn't scared, just curious, hopeful. I took a breath. "Well," I said softly, "now we get to decide what our life looks like, instead of waiting for someone else to decide it for us." She nodded slowly, absorbing each word as if storing it somewhere safe. "Can I show you something?" she asked suddenly. "Of course." She stood, walked to her room, and returned with her phone. Her expression was both excited and nervous. "I recorded something last night," she said, "after we got home." My eyebrows lifted. She placed the phone in my hands. "Just watch," she whispered. I pressed play. On the screen was Elara sitting at her desk, hair still wet from a shower, eyes red from the long day, but she wasn't broken. She looked brave, older than her years. Clearer in a way I had never seen. She started speaking. "This is for me, for the future, for the version of myself who needs to remember today." I felt my throat tighten. She continued, voice soft but steady. "Mom and I survived something people don't understand. We stayed quiet because we thought we had to. But today I saw my mom fight for us. I saw her stand in the truth, and I want to remember this day forever, because this is the day our life began again." The video ended. I stared at the screen long after it went dark, my vision blurring with tears I didn't try to hide. "Lara," I whispered. "Why didn't you show me this last night?" "Because," she said gently, touching my arm, "I wanted you to see it when you woke up safe." The word hit me like a tidal wave. Safe. She said it so simply, as if it had always been ours. But it hadn't. We were earning it now. One morning, one breath, one choice at a time. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly as sunlight warmed our faces. For a long moment, we just stayed like that. Mother and daughter, two survivors learning how to build peace from the ashes. When we finally let go, Elara looked at me with a spark in her eyes. "Mom," she said, "can we do something crazy today?" I laughed, wiping tears from my cheeks. "That depends. How crazy?" She grinned. "Let's go to the beach." The beach. A place we hadn't visited in years. A place we used to love. A place that had slowly disappeared from our lives when fear took too much space. I nodded. "Yeah, let's do it." An hour later, we were on the road, windows down, wind tangling our hair as the ocean appeared on the horizon like a promise. When we stepped onto the sand, the waves welcomed us with a roar. Loud, alive, endless. Elara ran ahead, laughing as the water splashed her ankles, really watched her, and felt something fierce and beautiful rise in my chest. Not anger, not grief, not even relief, but hope, a wide, wild, unstoppable hope. I walked toward the shoreline, letting the waves wash over my feet. The cold water curled around my ankles, grounding me. For the first time, I whispered words I had never allowed myself to say. "We made it." Elara turned, hair blowing in the wind. "Mom." "Yes." She smiled, bright, unbroken free. Let's start our new life. And there, with the ocean stretching beyond us like a new horizon, we did. Because sometimes the most powerful moment in a story isn't the escape, but the beginning.